Well, every road I see leads away from me. There's not a single one that leads me home. The road keeps saying, friend, come see what's round the bend. So is it any wonder that I roam? All the places I have been keep calling me back again. Down in the pines I hear the cold winds blow. My heart keeps telling me, footloose and fancy free, and the road goes by and calls me as it goes. Well, maybe somewhere there's a someone waiting with a smile, and maybe there'll be some place I can stop and rest a while, and maybe you weren't meant to be just a rolling stone, and there's a road to travel on that leads you back to home.
Remember to turn the mic on there. All right, everybody, welcome to the first episode of Tales on the Trails. My name is Duke. I'm your host tonight. I'm joined by my friend and channel manager, Garrett Woods.
Hi.
Basically, he's running the StreamYard in from this because I didn't know I could get my computer up and running on the internet good enough to do this until about 2 minutes ago. So anyway, I know I mentioned earlier in the week that we was going to do the Southern Indian Wars on this first episode, and that idea got scrapped because I didn't get a chance to read all the books I needed to read to kind of refresh myself on a lot of it. And Garrett was kind of wanting to talk about the Hayfield and Wagon Box fights because they've kind of got a nice tool there that it's like ones that were used up there. So anyway, with that, we might as well jump on in. And Garrett's going to be reading off on the comments, although I can see him over here. I'm going to let him read them off.
Okay.
And,
you want me to go through who's here?
Yeah, we might as well go through who's here.
We got 6 Semper Tyrannis. We got Gunsmith 4570. Duke Fraser Productions, 11 Bang Bang. That's Ethan. He's watching. Diane Houston, George Gooding, Old One Guy, Louisiana Gray. Chris Klein says hello all. Victor Schultz said good to see you. He's going to watch for a little while, then he's got to go to bed. And Garza Vlogs, Snapper is in. Yay. I believe he's moderating, guys, just so you know he's out there watching. And William Schosser is in. Sorry about that. Doug Dukes is in. Josh Langham. And that looks like it's about it. You guys got any questions while we're doing this? Shout them out, and we'll stop periodically, and I'll read them.
It's funny that you name off all those, and I'm looking here at the chat, and I only got about half of them.
Oh, yeah? Well, that's who's all in here according to StreamYard. We got 44 on this end. How many you got on your end there? You see on YouTube? I guess I can see.
It's not telling me over here on the YouTube side, but being I'm running this on my phone, I'm having trouble on here. I guess I could always open the chat on this side.
You have 9 watching on your side, so we're already over 50 in, according to this.
All right. Well, yeah. I see. I can see them there. So I don't know why they're not popping up on the YouTube side. Anyway, so we're going to talk tonight, focus more on the campaigns that took place during Red Cloud's War, kind of focus more on the Wagon Box and the Hayfield fights. And of those 2 fights, out of all the Powder River fights, there's some that they're not well known, not well talked about, especially the Hayfield fight. There's a book on the Wagon Box, but I have not been able to find one on the Hayfield fight. But there's lots of good articles out there. You just have to dig around. That's one nice thing about where I work at. I get access to JSTOR, which gives me access to a lot of papers. And trust me, I've printed a lot of papers. But anyway, to kind of set the stage for that, because that's one thing I like to do when I do my history talks is kind of set the stage, tell you what led up to this point and why it got to that point. And for these two fights, it's going to start with that 1851 Fort Laramie Treaty. And what's funny is, even though I work at Fort Laramie, it's kind of a bias, you might think, but Fort Laramie played a big role in a lot of what's going to go on in those Northern Plains Indian War campaigns. So Fort Laramie gets established 1849, and the Indian agent, who was Thomas Broken Hand Fitzpatrick, longtime trapper, mountaineer, spent a lot of time out in the West. He had been appointed Indian agent 1847, and in 49 he starts talking about getting all the tribes together for a big peace council because America's moving westward. There's no doubt about it. In 1848, we pretty much acquire all the territory that includes everything from Colorado to California and from southern parts of Wyoming, Idaho, all the way down to the border, with the exception of a little strip in Arizona and New Mexico that we'd acquire a few years later. But anyway, America's growing. Everybody's moving westward. In 1849, there you have the gold rush going on. Everybody's moving to California. And so Fitzpatrick wants to bring the tribes together, have one big peace council to basically negotiate the safe passage and safe travel through the West. And he chooses the location of Fort Laramie to have his gathering. It's kind of a central point. And of all the tribes that he reaches out to, not all of them show up, and it's probably fortunate that it happened that way because with the amount that did show up, which is estimated at about 10,000 people, with those that did show up, a lot of those tribes were bitter enemies. There was a couple instances where there was near disaster, but the peace was managed to be kept. And then at the end of that treaty, which is also known as the Horse Creek Treaty because they had to relocate due to the fact that the horses that everybody brought ate up the grass and there just wasn't that many resources. And the annuities promised to them for coming in to do the treaty was late showing up. The end of that, negotiates safe passage. It kind of establishes loose boundaries or territories for the tribes. And, everybody walks away fairly happy, but it's going to be a short-lived peace. In 1853, some group of natives that actually didn't participate in the 51 treaty are going to foolishly attack a handful of soldiers. The soldiers will wind up killing those two natives. And then that's going to lead to conflict the following year with what's known as the Grattan Fight or Grattan Massacre. Basically, with that, one of the men that was a brother to one of the ones killed the prior year, a man by the name of High Forehead, who's of the Minneconjou tribe of the Lakota Nation, he's accused of stealing a cow. And this is one of those things where, history is not quite clear, and there's a lot of times in history you can't put a definite answer on something. This is one of those times. What we do know is that a cow was killed and eaten, and he took the blame for it. Whether he actually stole it, whether he found it, it was left behind, we don't really know that. But what we do know is it's going to lead to conflict that's going to erupt in decades of war in the Northern Plains with peaceful stretches in between. But it's pretty much just a constant state of warfare after this. So after Grattan gets wiped out, General William Harney, who's now commander of the Dragoons, he's going to bring his Dragoons out west. Basically, he's out for vengeance because one of the mainstays that time for Indian policy is to chastise them anytime something goes wrong. And it doesn't matter if you got the ones that were wrong. Just that show of force is enough to, make the rest of them behave, or so they thought. And what it's going to do is he's going to attack a peaceful village of Brule around Blue Water Creek, which is also known as Ash Hollow today. And that's going to ignite the First Sioux War. That's going to last for a couple of years. At the end of that one, things kind of quiet down again. then you're going to move into the Civil War period, which is going to see a lot of transition and more conflict out here in the West. So federal troops get pulled back east to fight the regular fighting, or I should say, to fight the Confederacy. Volunteer units are sent out in their place. And at Fort Laramie, that's one time where cavalry is going to dominate during the Indian Wars. It's mostly cavalry that you see at Fort Laramie. And of that group, you're going to have the 11th Ohio, the 11th Kansas Cav, the 7th Kansas Cav for a while, 6th Iowa Infantry, and not the entire groups, but companies of each of those. The 11th Ohio was the biggest concentration, and even out of that, those companies were scattered out between Fort Laramie and Sweetwater, Wyoming, along with the 11th Kansas Cavalry to protect, spots along the Oregon Trail. Mm-hmm. And they're going to get there towards the latter end of the war, so 1864 through 1865. And in 1864, tensions are continually mounting. You can definitely tell that there's a fight coming again. And actually down in Colorado, a colonel by the name of John Shivington is going to attack a peaceful village of Cheyennes because the Cheyennes had been accused of attacking farms, massacring families in eastern Colorado, western Kansas. And so Shivington goes out basically to do what Harney did. It's a chastisement. And he comes across the first village he can find, which he pretty well set it up so he could find them. He told Black Kettle and his followers to go to Sand Creek and wait until they were escorted back for their peace council. And he attacks them and wipes out women and children indiscriminately. And then after that, the troopers do mutilations that, I'm not going to get into the details on that on this chat. But it was a national atrocity, and even people at the time viewed it as an atrocity. And so that's going to spark the 1865 Indian War. And that's going to start out with the sacking of Julesburg. And at Julesburg, Colorado, it was a stage town. There's telegraph. It was on some of the rail lines. There's also an army fort there, and I cannot remember the name of it, but at one time it was called Fort Sedgwick. I've seen that referenced a time or two. I cannot remember the other name of it. It starts with an R, forgive me. And just my disclaimer is all my books on this subject are up in Wyoming right now, so I'm doing this all out of here. So things might get a little screwy. But anyway, they're going to attack Julesburg. The commanding officer there manages to defend the fort fairly well. Basically, as the Indians are surrounding the fort, he orders his men to fire not full charges in the cannon. He orders the half charges, third charges, basically giving the Indians a false sense of security, how close they can get. And then once they get within range, he unloads with a full bore and pushes the Indians away. And then the Indians realize, well, the people of Julesburg have all went inside the fort. Nobody's defending the town. Let's just go ransack the town and take all these supplies. And that's what they did. They ransacked Julesburg. They take supplies, and Trooper said they were able to find out where the village was at because they followed the trails of corn and flour that was loaded on the horses and stuff as they left, and they took a lot of livestock. So that starts the 1865 Indian War. In order to escape further persecution, some of the Cheyennes are going to move north into the Powder River country. And this is where, the Cheyennes are kind of going to split. And this is where your Northern Plains Indian Wars and your Southern Plains Indian Wars are going to split. But they're all focused right on that 1864 event, the Sand Creek Massacre. And so the Bent brothers, who were kind of leading the Cheyenne part of this thing, because they were half white, well respected amongst the Cheyennes, understood the ways of the white world, and also they had served in the Confederate Army for a time. They're going to kind of lead things around, be crucial parts of that. And so through 1865, they're going to cause trouble all up and down eastern Wyoming. They're going to attack Platte River Bridge. which is where the town of Casper, Wyoming is now, where young Lieutenant Casper Collins gets killed. And then the town is going to take his name. He was the son of William O. Collins, who was the commanding officer of Fort Laramie at this time. And he's the one that Fort Collins got the name from, the father, not the son. The son got Casper named after him, Fort Casper. And then that campaign is going to continue on pretty much up until the end of 1865. And then it really doesn't come to an end. Things kind of quiet down for a little bit. And then right on its heels, you're going to get into the basis of the conflict we're going to be talking about, Red Cloud's War. So I need to take a break, grab a drink there. I'll let Garrett read through the comments here.
Okay, before you go, guys, we are still working out how we're doing this split channels. We haven't really decided. It's probably going to all go to Duke's channel next time. But just to let Duke know, right now, my sources say we're running 30 on your end, 30 on my end, and running an average of 60. And the reason you weren't seeing all that is because my StreamYard has all the comments, but I can only see the comments on my side on my YouTube channel. So that's how that's working, just so you know.
I see.
So, yeah. Anyway, I'm going to roll back up through here. There were some people with some good questions. Stephen M. Mann is in. Jay Wheeler 331 said, "What's up, guys?"
Hey!
Stephen M. Mann is studying on the 70-150 Winchester. That's gonna pack some wallop. I would imagine. Okay, so Louisiana Gray said, "I broke down and got a walker today because of Willard McBain's 45-65 rounds." Yeah, that's kind of an ongoing joke. Congrats. Okay, and then they're just kind of talking about that. Yee Red Dead Rimfire. I know there are some questions here. They're talking about cartridges for the moment. Okay, Shivington, William Schlossler said Shivington with drunks from Larimer Street in Denver. Old West history wants to know, was Black Cattle Southern Cheyenne?
Yes. Well, there's, and I don't have my Cheyenne book to reference on that. And so I'm not going to be able to answer it with 100% accuracy. But Black Kettle was supposedly a group of Cheyenne that were pretty well starting to disappear. I want to say it was the Shutai, and I'm probably screwing that up. But they were kind of an off branch, and they kind of become the Southern Cheyenne, a lot of those. So, yeah, Black Kettle was closely associated with the Southern Cheyenne. So were the Bent brothers. Pretty much as the Cheyenne started moving out of the Dakotas and down into Nebraska, Wyoming, northern Colorado, a group of them are going to stay up in the North Platte country. Another group is going to start making its way down into the South Platte and Arkansas River country. And so as they're moving down, William Benn at that time is establishing his trading post. He makes friends with him, and that's when they really make that move down in here because they can establish a trade with William Benn. And so the Arapaho kind of do the similar thing, and that's when they start being associated as the Southern Cheyenne, Northern Cheyenne. And then, during the Indian Wars, they're officially going to get split because the Southern Cheyenne are sent down into Oklahoma eventually. The Northern Cheyenne, they try to send them down there, and that lasts a very short time. And then you have what's going to be a topic for another day, but they call the Cheyenne Breakout of 1878, where they basically said, we don't like it here, we're going home. And if you've ever seen the movie Cheyenne Autumn, that's kind of basically the story of what happens, although it's not quite right.
Jimmy Stewart was the greatest.
But oh, God,
Jimmy Stewart was the greatest Wyatt Earp. No, I'm just kidding. I was going to say Cleophas A is in here.
Now, I think this deck's got 5 aces in it.
Oh, my. That's good. I was gonna read just to piggyback on what he was saying here. The Black Kettle's family is still around here where I live. My great grandpa worked in the same jip mill as Black Kettle's grandson, and I grew up. His name was Charlie Little Coyote. I grew up right there with him most of the time around, and so yeah, they're still all right here in southern Kansas, Oklahoma. A lot of them are anyway. There was Soylent Green's in. William Schlosser says Shivington was a Remington guy.
Do I say it? Do I say it?
We lost your sound.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Actually, at Sand Creek, the troops that were there, they over to Fort Union over there in New Mexico and got an allotment of Colts. So that was the 3rd Colorado Cav. No, they for sure that they had the Colt 1860 Armies. And actually, there was a lot of Western troops that did have Remingtons for a time, and Garrett has gotten into why that is. And it wasn't. Them. Yeah,
they didn't like them.
There was that thing too, but there's also this issue of one, fire at the Colt factory, and 2, Colt had a really good job of pissing off the Army Ordnance Board, and so he didn't get a lot of contracts, to be honest.
They lost their contract after he was dead, but they did lose the contract. It was Root that really just dug his heels in and would not lower the price.
Yeah,
of the 1860 Army.
But you're going to see, and one good thing I'll say about the Remington is that when the Remington come in, it did make the Colt more affordable because you can see that price drop like right quick. The Remingtons were going for about $12 a piece, right around there. The Colts were going for about 24 to 25 prior to that. After that, you can see on even in and I'm referring to civilian advertising, the price of the Colt drops in 1865 down to 14, 15, and $16 thereabouts. So between $14 and $16.
Just so you know, that is the first year Richard Jarvis took over, and that's one of the first things he did because Root wouldn't do it, and it cost him. But go ahead, sorry.
Right. And see, and Colt had done that for a long time because Colt's a profiteer. And even when he was making the Walker, he was making the Walker for something like $10 a piece and charging the government $25. And there's letters where he tells Eli Whitney Jr., don't let the Army know I'm charging them this much when it only cost me this much to make them.
Yep. And just so you know, I firmly believe, and I'll get off this, but I firmly believe that since Root lost that was because he was not the businessman Colt was. If the government had come to Colt asking for a drop in price, Colt wouldn't have liked it, but he wouldn't have just stood firm. He would have gone around, wrote letters, patted some pockets in Congress. You know, he'd have worked his way around, maybe cut it a little bit, but not a whole lot, worked his way around. That was what made him the shrewd businessman he was. But yeah, so they had lost that.
That's why I say Colt would make, if you're a Star Trekkie, because I'm kind of a Star Wars and Star Trekkie guy, something that people don't know, a lot of people don't know about me, but Colt is basically the Ferengi. He would have made an excellent Ferengi.
Yep. Everything black powder's in. He said, howdy, boys. We're probably going to have to talk about that 46 caliber, slightly larger than long, extra Colt cartridge pretty soon. West Covina Dodge is in. He says, hey, guys, just lurking. William Schlosser said he was just kidding about the Remington thing.
Yeah, I know. And the whole thing with the Remingtons and the Colt boys, it's like we give each other crap all the time. But at the end of the day, I mean, the Remington, it is a good revolver. It gets a lot of crap during the Civil War because that was early production. It was not well produced in the early war years. But if you look at the records of when Colt was first getting started, and I'm not talking Patterson days, I'm talking the Hartford days, about a third of the Colts blew up in testing. In the Army testing. And they note that after about 1849 and 1850, that's when the material gets better and all of a sudden the blown up guns goes down to non-existent. The Remingtons and historically they were junk during the Civil War years, but you get in the post-Civil War, and they're actually fairly decent guns. It's just that Remington couldn't compete with Colt, and they couldn't compete with Smith & Wesson, and they almost went bankrupt. And if it wasn't for the fact that they made an excellent rifle in the rolling block, they wouldn't have survived.
Gina Wood
And why the
Star
government
Wars.
didn't buy the rolling block instead of making them trapdoors, I'll never know, because that rolling block design is a lot better.
It was way cheaper to make the trapdoors.
This is true.
They already had the stocks, they already had the locks, and up until 1873, they already had the barrels that cost like $3 to convert one of those, where it would cost like $50 to make a Remington.
But even General Custer preferred the Remington rolling block.
Yep, and the real Sherman was the one that got them to stop making the trapdoor for about 3 years and only make rolling blocks. But that's a subject for a different day.
Yeah,
46 longer than average Colt. Sorry, 46 longer than average Colt. I'm sorry. So anyway, we're going to talk about the guns used at the time. You got a Remington handy?
Yeah, let me go grab them. I'll be right back.
All right. Yeah, William, I'd agree with you. Got an original right here. It's probably, I like the 51 Navy. I like this about the same. I really like the Snapper's original 62 Pocket Navy. It was one of my absolute favorites, one that I just did a video on. But I have to say, it's just hard to beat the balance and the feel and the action of an original 1862 made Colt 1860 Army. They're just work of art. Okay. So, are we almost to the Hayfield fight here? Is that where we're at first?
Right. I was going to talk about Fetterman, and then
all right. Yeah, because we need to talk about that.
And you guys don't have a Springfield regular muzzleloader, do you?
No, but I got something pretty close to it.
You got that Zouave?
I got the Zouave up there.
All right.
Just give me just a second here. Yeah, I'm going to shut off and you can have it for a minute.
Okay. All right. So getting into some of the guns you're going to see out there that are going to be used by troops. The 11th Ohio, and they'd spent quite a bit of time out here. They're going to see some of that early part of Red Cloud's War they're going to see the end of the 1865 campaign, And 11th Ohio is armed with Remingtons for the most part, although those that could afford it and could swing it are going to run with Colts. So the 1860 Army is coming around. A few of the officers are noted for carrying the 51 Navy, and no, I didn't get a London model. I just put my 73 single action grips off my 4440 on this one. So those are going to be the three main ones you're going to see out here at that time. Yeah, so that one's on the handgun side. On the rifle side, early on, you're going to see the old-fashioned muzzle stuffers, which Garrett has right there.
This is not a Springfield, by the way, guys. If you can hear me, I have my microphone back on. This is actually a replica Zouave. So I don't have a Springfield. The only difference between this really and what they would have had is this one has a patch box. What they would have had iron mountings and 3 barrel bands. Literally would have looked just like this one. See, iron mount and no patch box and 3 barrel bands. Really long.
And I don't suppose we was lucky enough to have the Spencer come in today.
No, it's going to be here Monday. We'll have it on next time.
Okay. So we're I'll kind of continue on here, leading on to that. So in late 1865, early 1866, the Army starts to try to negotiate passage along the Bozeman Trail. And so during the Civil War, gold had been found up around Bozeman, Montana. And John Bozeman blazes a trail that goes right up the front of the Bighorn Mountains and right through territory that the Lakota believed was given to them under the 51 Fort Laramie Treaty. And a good portion of this is also Crow territory too. But see, the problem that had arose there is that from the fur trade era, there's so many buffalo had been pushed into that country. That's pretty much where the last of the big herd in that area was located at, was in that. It was the prime hunting grounds. And so the Lakota were pushed into territory owned by the Crows. and everybody was pushing in because, like I said, great hunting grounds. And so the Lakota didn't want anybody really in there. And they viewed the road being there as a violation of the 51 Treaty, because the version they had agreed to said nothing about the Army being able to build forts and roads. The version that Congress had sent back that hadn't been ratified, that it was with their amendments, one of their amendments was that the Army could build roads and forts as it saw fit in the territories. So it comes down to is, well, who was right and who was wrong. Because the natives viewed it as it was a done deal. It was already signed and agreed to. However, American politics is, once you agree to it, you put a bunch more amendments into it and then send it back again, back and forth until somebody finally gives in and signs the dang gum thing. So it never really gets ratified. The 51 Treaty was never ratified by Congress. And so it comes down to, well, the natives believe that it's in violation. Americans believe that it's within their rights under the treaty. And so the only way to resolve it, they figure, is to, well, let's sit down and have another treaty about this. At the time that Red Cloud and a lot of the natives had come in to talk on this new treaty, basically for safe passage through the Powder River country, which Red Cloud didn't want that. That's prime hunting ground. And when the Oregon Trail had come through with the amount of traffic that was on that, it had really caused a lot of problems with the availability of game, because the people on the trail just scared the game away. And so Red Cloud really doesn't want it. And the government kind of got ahead of itself and was absolutely sure that Red Cloud's going to agree to it. And so before he even signs the treaty, they send Colonel Carrington and all his troops up the Bozeman Trail to build and establish 3 forts along the trail. Well, the first one is going to be known as Fort Reno, which also was, I cannot remember the name of it prior to that, but it becomes Fort Reno. The next one is Fort Phil Kearny, and then the last one is Fort C.F. Smith. That is the 3 main forts that are along the Bozeman Trail. And as Carrington arrives at Fort Laramie, Red Cloud gets pretty upset, and he says, before I even agree to allow you to travel, to sell you this land to travel, sell you this road, and allow you to build the forts, you already send the men there to steal it. And at this point, I'm not going to talk anymore. We're going to have a fight, and I'm going to make that trail run red with blood. And he keeps up to that statement. And so conflict is going to start up. But even though, Red Cloud's War goes on for about 2 years, it's not really going to be like the 1876 Indian War, the Great Sioux War. It's going to be mostly attacking small attacks, small skirmishes here and there, with a few exceptions. And the first real big major battle is going to occur in December of 1866. And that's going to become known as the Fetterman Fight or the Fetterman Massacre. So what had happened there is that usually the Native Americans had a fighting season. They'd fight in the summertime. In the fall, they'd start worrying about hunting buffalo to build up their supplies before they go into winter camp, because once the winter camp hits, all of that snow comes down. It gets pretty difficult for, to get out and hunt. You just can't travel that well. And so the Army is used to that. They fight in the summertime, in the wintertime, the fighting goes away. Well, Red Cloud at this point says, we're going to fight year round. And so leading up to that, they start attacking the wood trains, the wagon trains that were bringing wood back to the fort. So where they had located Fort Phil Kearny, it was about a 5-mile trip to go get lumber to come back and use for firewood and to build the fort itself. Because if you look at Fort Phil Kearny and a lot of the forts up there, they're the typical ones you see in the Western movies, where they do have the wooden stockade around the parade ground and such. And so Carrington decided to build those stockades for defense, because they really don't have a lot of troops at these little forts to fend off the amount of Indians that are they're going to be fighting in this territory. So the wagon train up there at Fort Phil Kearny, it's happened to go 4 or 5 miles, and the Indians started attacking them, just hitting them every chance they can get. Basically, just, the little bitty tactics just to drive everybody nuts, let them know they're still there. And a couple weeks prior to the Fetterman Massacre, Crazy Horse gets this idea, well, maybe we can lure them into a trap because, soldiers are stupid in the ways of Indian warfare, to be quite honest. They're trained in more Napoleonic style tactics. And so Crazy Horse tries this theory, and they attack the woodcutting train. The relief column sent out, and then Crazy Horse jumps off his horse and starts playing around like something's wrong. And he successfully decoys young Lieutenant Grummond to chase him. And it's almost going to end in a disaster. However, I forget which officer it was. I do believe it was Ten Eyck. Comes in from the other direction and scares off the ambush. And so Ten Eyck and Grummond meet each other. It's like, well, where did the Indians go? That was very close to being a disaster right there. And it showed Crazy Horse that the troops could be decoyed. They were like children in their viewpoint. They were like children. They could decoy them in and make them come attack and wipe them out all at once. And so Red Cloud says, all right, let's give it a try. And so when the Fetterman fight comes about, they do the same thing. They're going to attack a wood train. The fort's going to be notified, and Colonel Carrington is going to give Fetterman the orders. Go out, relieve that woodcutting train, and return back to the fort. Under no circumstance do you cross
that ridge.
That ridge, and I forgot the name of it. Had a brain fart here. But anyway, Lodge Trail Ridge. Do not cross Lodge Trail Ridge. And so Fetterman goes out from the fort, and this is where it kind of gets thing we don't know. It's one of those things in history we're never going to be able to actually pinpoint the exact what happened, who made the decision. But right after Fetterman leaves, Carrington is going to send out Grummond with cavalry to reinforce him. He's going to tell Grummond, under no circumstance do you cross Lodge Trail Ridge. And Grummond goes out, meets up with Fetterman, and the next thing you know, here the troopers go up and over the ridge. And supposedly what had happened is that Crazy Horse decoyed him once again, only this time he showed him parts of his anatomy that we won't discuss on this one. But the troops go across. So where it comes down to is, did Fetterman disregard orders? Well, I'm of the opinion that Fetterman had enough respect for Carrington as a soldier to not disregard orders. Fetterman was a fighting man, yes, but if you look at him, he doesn't come across to me as the kind of guy that just outright disobey. However, Lieutenant Grummond had got lured into and got decoyed a few weeks prior to this. Probably seen that, couldn't resist the opportunity to make a name for himself because young lieutenants like to get in trouble. And so took off, and I do believe that it happened is that Grummond took off, and Fetterman had to follow to support him. Mm-hmm. And then for about an hour or so after that, they're going to hear continuous gunfire. And what basically happened, and I have been up there to that site, and basically you go through a draw. You come down on a finger ridge that comes down out of that draw, turns into a ridge. And it's probably about a mile long what that battlefield is. And a lot of movies and stuff, it gets depicted as a real close, tight-up course battle. But in reality, it was stretched out over about a mile. And I forget which side was which, but the Lakota natives came in from one side, the Cheyenne and Arapaho came in from the other. And even though that the U.S. soldiers had the high ground, they were completely overwhelmed. The infantry soldiers that were there were still carrying Springfield muskets. So they're carrying the old muzzle loaders, the muzzle stuffers. They're going to be averaging about 3 rounds per minute. That's it. Good soldier might get a 4th one in there, but not likely. The Cav were carrying Spencer rifles, not carbines, rifles. For whatever reason. Yeah. For whatever reason, the musician band at Fort Phil Kearny had Spencers, and Carrington took them away and gave them to the Cav. But they're carrying Spencer rifles. Even though it's about an even split on Cav and infantry, the Spencer rifles aren't enough really to save them. And their position where they was at, it's kind of indefensible. And also there was 2 civilians there that were carrying the Henry rifles.
Yes, sir.
And I forget what the total number was, but they said something about it was like 140 some odd rounds of ammunition that they had found where those 2 men with the Henrys, they could pretty well find where they had made their last stand in a pile of rocks. 140 some rounds, I think, was the number. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong if you know it, but quite a bit of rounds of ammunition they had expended, and there was a lot of blood stains in a circle around that position. So the men with the Henrys did hold out for a while. And one bugler, an Adolf Metzger, pretty well fought with a bugle. And he's the only one there that was not mutilated at the end of it.
Never stopped fighting.
He never stopped fighting. He kept swinging that until he got killed, and then the natives put a buffalo robe over him and left him behind because he had fought with such bravery. They showing him basically their respect. At this point, Carrington has realized that Fetterman's in trouble, and he'd sent Ten Eyck up to relieve him, and Ten Eyck's going to get to the top of the hill pretty much in time to see the carnage of the mutilation going on. But the natives at this point are pretty well moving on. They've made their point. And so that's going to start kind of changing things around. Carrington is going to get called back, and eventually he's going to get drummed out to the military because he takes most of the blame for it. But the following summer, and you get into August, Red Cloud decides to go on the offensive once again. And he's been on the offensive all summer long, but it's mostly been small skirmishes, hitting small wagon trains here and there, just aggravating the army and letting them know that they're still in the area. So you get into August, and Red Cloud finally decides, well, they need to do simultaneous attacks because a lot of what's been going on has been down at Fort Phil Kearny. And so they decide that the Cheyenne, Arapaho, and Lakota are going to divide forces. The Cheyenne and Arapaho and some Lakota are going to go up to Fort C.F. Smith. The rest, the Oglalas, Red Cloud's band, are going to go and hit Fort Phil Kearny. And they want to do it at about the same time. And they're going to succeed. They're going to do it exactly one day after the other. So on August, Garrett, I forgot the date, August 1st.
Of the Hayfield fight?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's either August 1st or August 2nd.
I have to stop here and look at it because I got it right here in the book.
Right.
Just so I don't get it wrong.
Well, what day was the wagon box?
The wagon box was...
And I apologize, folks, but I'm doing this all off the top of my head, so my dates, I always get them screwed up on the day.
I'm sure somebody's already Googled it by now.
Right.
Let's see. I'm looking.
See if anybody appears on the
27th.
Well, anyway, it was in August 1867.
I want to say it's the 7th there, but I'm not. Okay, August. The wagon box fight happens August 2nd, and the Hayfield fight happens August 1st.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, so August 1st, I was right. Just wanted to double check there because, like I said, my dates get screwed up. So on August 1st, the Cheyenne, Arapaho, and some Lakota are going to attack the hay cutting crew up at Fort C.F. Smith. And the hay cutting crew had taken and made a fortification out of wagon boxes out close to where they were cutting hay at. And so they fall back in as the attack comes on. And this battle is one that's going to last most of the day. And then the following day, you're going to have what's known as the wagon box fight at Fort Phil Kearny. And what happens is Red Cloud and Crazy Horse are going to attack the woodcutting detail. Once again, they hit the woodcutting details like crazy up at Fort Phil Kearny. and the men are going to fall back into a fortification made out of wagon boxes. Because at Fort Phil Kearny, hauling all that timber, what they do is take that box off of the running gear of the wagon, and then you just load the logs on that, haul it back. And so they use the wagon boxes as a fortification. Now, it's not quite clear if they really built those boxes to be defended, like if they bermed up the wagon boxes with dirt, but at the Hayfield fight, they had. And so at the Hayfield fight, you're not going to see very many casualties on the soldier side, but it's about the same as both these battles are going to be about the same in total numbers. And so it's about anywhere from 300 to 1,000 warriors on the estimate. I'm willing to bet it's going to be about the 5 to 6, maybe 700 at each place. The soldiers are going to be about 20 some odd with a bunch of civilians mixed in. And it's noted that at both locations, the civilians there were carrying Spencers. Though, if I remember right, at the wagon box, there was at least one guy that had a Henry. And so the troops are ordered to fall back in both cases, back to the defensive positions. And at this point, the troops are no longer carrying muzzleloaders. In July, back just right around Independence Day, about the middle of July. About the middle of July, all of a sudden, the soldiers are issued a relatively new weapon, and this is probably the fastest that a new weapon is adopted and issued, and that is the Allen conversion.
Type 2.
Type 2, 1866 Allen conversion. And so what has happened is that old muzzleloader has had its barrel chopped out, had a chunk chopped out of its barrel.
Okay, I don't know that. Let me stop just a second here. I know 90% of you guys know this, but for anybody that doesn't, the way that this one works, of course, is you load everything down the barrel of the paper cartridge. You cock it, you put a cap on the nipple right there, and then you fire it. Just a little bit of background here, not to interrupt you, but in 1864, they were already working on conversions. In 1865, Erskine Allen came out with a conversion in 58 rimfire. 58 rimfire, they had a bunch of ammo blow up when it all shook together, so they thought, oh, we got to go to centerfire. So in 66, actually it's called 66, but it comes out in 67, he comes up with this, which is the 66 trapdoor, 5070 cartridge right in there. Close it, you're ready to fire really fast. And I believe that these soldiers were literally some of the first guys outfitted with these. Go ahead, Dick. Right. I'm sorry.
So they've got these new conversions. They've been sleeved down to 50 caliber. They take the 5070, if I remember right, centerfire at this point. The centerfire actually came in pretty quick, even though rimfire is going to stick around for a long time. And so prior to that, like I said, with the old muzzleloaders, 3 rounds a minute is what's typical. With this gun, now you can achieve upwards of 8 rounds a minute. So you're pretty well doubling, if not tripling, your reload, your ability to fire. And so now that's on par with the bow and arrow. And it's worth noting that most of the natives that are fighting with bows and arrows. There's not a lot of guns that are going to be around there. And what guns there are going to be muzzle loaders. Probably even a bunch of flintlock trade guns at this point as well. Besides a bow and arrow, then it's hand tools, tomahawks, clubs, knives and such, spears. And so they're not quite on the same level as the troops when it comes to firepower. However, that had been more than enough at the Fetterman fight. But it's going to make a difference. This Allen conversion is going to make a difference. That the fact the soldiers had a defensive position. But in both the wagon box and the Hayfield fight, between 20 and 30 soldiers are able to hold off anywhere in the ballpark of 700 natives for the better part of a day. And so in both instances, what happens is that the soldiers are in the defensive position until the natives either quit or relief is sent out to them. And up at Fort C.F. Smith at the Hayfield fight, as it starts to get towards dark, that's when the Army decides to send out a relief column with mountain howitzers, the 12-pound mountain howitzers. But at this point, the natives have pretty well given up. And that's because this new gun, it kind of bedazzled them, if you will. They were used to the soldiers firing their rounds, reloading, and while they were reloading, they go in and wipe them out. So, and the Comanches had used this down in Texas, the same tactic, only the Texas Rangers educated them quite a few years earlier. And so what had happened is the natives would send in what's known as a false charge, sacrifice a few, get the soldiers to discharge their muskets, and while the soldiers are reloading, you send in the main force, and you have victory. And that's probably why they were able to wipe out Fetterman so quickly at the Fetterman fight. But at the Hayfield fight and the Wagon Box fight as well, they send in their false charge. The soldiers shoot. They send in the main charge. The soldiers are still shooting. Then they think, well, maybe there's a few more soldiers than what we thought. They send in another one, and it just keeps happening. And and down at the Wagon Box, Red Cloud kind of sits back and thinks, "Oh, what's going on here?" And they try different tactics. At Wagon Box, the Wagon Box is located just on the edge of a ridge, and so they'll send native snipers, if you will, in to try to pick a few off, but that's not successful. And so, whereas they'd wiped out 80 men about 9 months before, they can't handle 20 some odd men. Mm-hmm. And what it really comes down to is the improved rate of fire and a defensive position. Now, at the Wagon Box fight, like I said, it's not real clear if they had burned up the wagons with dirt. I've not seen much record on that. I need to go back and read it.
Just a note, this book right here, I haven't read the whole book yet, but this is Wagon Box Fight, an episode of Red Cloud's War by Jerry Keenan. In there's some firsthand accounts that state that literally all they had, they were inside the wagon boxes. All they had between them and the natives' arrows and musket balls was 1 inch of wood. So Obviously, I don't believe they were dirted up.
No, but now at the Hayfield, it is noted that they did have dirt packed up against them. Yeah. But 1 inch of wood, that's going to stop a native bow pretty easy. But a musket ball, it's not going to stop them. So there's not really providing cover; it's providing concealment.
Maybe now's a good time to talk about the guns that, if the natives, a lot of what they would have been using at the time.
Northwest trade gun.
And Lehman rifles. And Lehman trade
and
rifles.
Lehman rifles, yeah. So it's going to be the trade guns that are around, mostly muzzle stuffers, but there's not a lot of them. Even after the Fetterman Massacre, there wasn't a lot of the Spencers. I mean, there were some Spencers used, but for them to get ammunition, they would have had to attack and get that ammunition off of another group of soldiers. So what ammunition they had got extinguished fairly quick.
Just one other thing I've thought about as we're talking about this. Could you imagine a native who learned to differentiate between cavalry and infantry attack? Because cavalry got these little short guns that shoot over and over and over and over again. So you ride up there and you're like, and the natives know what they are because they've captured them before, Spencers. Mm-hmm. So they ride up there and they're like, oh, we must be looking for Spencers. And they don't see a single Spencer. All they see is what from a distance literally looks identical. I mean, literally looks identical except for this little rise right here to the muzzleloader musket they're used to fighting against.
Right.
So you're like, what is going on?
And so, that's going to change kind of, but that's going to be the last two major events of Red Cloud's War is going to be this Wagon Box fight and the Hayfield fight. And after that, it goes back to being smaller skirmishes again. But in 1868, the government decides that enough fighting, we need to negotiate. And Red Cloud basically tells the government, I ain't coming in to negotiate until you shut down the forts and close down the trail. And, the government decides to capitulate to it because even in the press, the Red Cloud's War was getting a bad rap. We just got done with the Civil War. Here we are still fighting another war again. Let's find a peaceful resolution. And so the government will go find a peaceful resolution. Basically, they pull the troops out of the forts. And as the troops are leaving the forts, Red Cloud at this point agreed essentially to a ceasefire. As the troops are leaving the fort, Red Cloud burns them down. And once he gets them burned down, then he comes in and signs the 68 Fort Laramie Treaty. And under that treaty, that's going to establish basically the reservation system. It's going to establish what they call agencies, where they're going to be scattered throughout the Dakotas, part of Nebraska, and Wyoming. And this region that they've been fighting over, this Powder River country, is going to be designated as unceded Indian territory. Basically, no white man can be inside of it. It's not owned by any one tribe. However, the tribes are allowed to go in there and hunt at any time they want, but they're not supposed to technically occupy it permanently, be living there. They're supposed to come back and live on their agencies and then just go up there for their summer, fall, and hunts to get their supplies. And this agreement is supposed to last for as long as the buffalo roam in there. And so it's the one time that the Native Americans came out and forced a treaty in their benefit and where they actually won over the United States government. But it's going to be short-lived because in 1874, they're going to find gold in the Black Hills, which is firmly within this territory of unceded Indian territory. And the government needs gold at that point because the country's in an economic crisis. And so they try to renegotiate in 1875, and it's going to blow up into another war in 1876.
Mm-hmm. Hey, you got through that in less than an hour.
Yeah, I did. Maybe it's because I've talked about it a time or two.
Okay, so we're not done here quite, guys, because we're going to go through some chat. But if you don't mind, Dick, if you want to take just a little break, I'll piggyback a little bit talking about the rifle, which is, in my opinion, the rifle here, the 66, is really the star of this story.
Yes.
And remember, they had only gotten these guns 3 weeks before the fight. Actually, 2 weeks. Weeks and a couple of days.
Yeah. Once you put it into that perspective, they didn't have them very long.
Literally, as far as I know, never fired this gun. A lot of them have actually said that in the books I've read. They hadn't even practiced with it. A few of them had. They practiced loading. They really hadn't spent the ammunition at the time. I believe the doctrine was 3 rounds of ammo per man per year, and that included when they started going to this right here, right, for training. It was like nothing. So these guys were coming into this completely blind. They had no idea what the ranges were of this gun, what this gun could do. They had been told. And like I said, this is literally just the same gun they'd had, except for if you look at the end of the barrel there, and I don't know if we can make it out here because it's so shiny, it's sleeved. This is just a 61, or actually this one's a 64 model Springfield muzzleloader that was 58 caliber. They sleeved the end of the barrel to make it 50. And then they literally there's no receiver on this one. 73 trapdoors will have receivers. This one has no receiver. It's literally just, I'm trying to do that on camera backwards. The top of the barrel is cut out and this breech block is put in. No receiver.
Basically, your receiver is about that wide by about that long.
Yeah.
It's got two screws holding it to the gun.
That is the receiver. Whereas when you get to like the 73, it'll have its own receiver.
Yeah, it's a screwed in. It's an actual receiver. But yeah, technically it's that little piece that attaches right. But if Garrett could get up closer on there, right behind the sight, there's that little square piece right there.
And
that's the receiver on there.
Later guns, this will go all the way around and the barrel will screw into it.
Yeah.
On this one, it's just screwed with 2 screws right into the top of the gun. And by the way, this one right here is a pretty good representation of what those guys would have been getting, because you can see the wood's not new, but the wood was not new when they got it, because these were Civil War muskets that had been used. They literally just took them, cut the top off. They had to bend the hammer over so it could reach the firing pin and sleeve the barrels. Now, just to explain to you how crazy this was, that when they got into the fight with these things, most of them had never fired a shot out of them. All they had was this book, and this is a copy of the book they had. This is a replica of it, but it is the descriptions and rules for the management of the Springfield breech loading rifle musket model of 1866. There are a grand total of 9 pages, and the soldiers were only allowed to use page 7, which is directions for use. You want me to read directions for use? Just so they know exactly. This is all those guys knew about.
Because I ordered this book and my order got canceled, so I don't have it.
It says, number 1, raise the thumb piece with the thumb and the forefinger in the right hand and push the block forward until it rests against the hinge strap. If there be an empty shell in the chamber, it will loosen it. By the way, 66s don't kick them all the way out. They just loosen them, and then you got to shake them out or pull them out. It will loosen it from its place by the extractor hook and thrown out by the ejector spring. Okay, well, mine must be broken because it don't do that. Then turn back the breech block and press it into the receiver of the barrel. Let's see. To load, insert a cartridge until the rim comes against the point of the ejector spring. Turn back the breech block and press it into the receiver of the barrel. When the cartridge will be pushed into place, in pressing down the breech block, the cam latch will spring into its place and lock it. To make sure of this, it may be well that the soldier acquire the habit of pressing the thumb on the thumb piece as the hand pressing the thumb on the thumb piece as the hand is withdrawn to its place. Should there be much difficulty in pressing down the thumb piece, it should be possible that the head of the cartridge is too thick. So this is trial by fire. They have no idea what's going on, and it should be withdrawn and another cartridge tried. This is where it gets interesting. They put this right in the very first manual. If the ejector spring should break, that's confidence in your gun. Remove the barrel from the stock in the middle of a fight, by the way. Take this, because this is the soldiers. This is not the armorer's part. This is in the soldier's page. If the ejector spring should break, remove the barrel from the stock, take out the ejector cap screw, and insert the end of the band spring punch in the counterbore for the screw head and drive it out towards the bottom of the barrel. The cap being dovetailed on the edges, it should not be pried out from the bottom. Remove the old spring and put a new one in. Reassemble in inverse motion. It should be understood that the ejector friction springs are convenient rather than necessary, and that the piece is not necessarily disabled if one or both of them should break, for the shell can be easily removed by the fingers after being loosened by the extractor hook. And then it goes on, and basically it just goes on for another 3 paragraphs on what to do if your rifle breaks down in combat. Basically disassemble the entire thing. And of course, what the guys actually started doing, of course, was they'd open the trap door, grab what they called the clearing rod, throw it down the barrel, and try to knock the cartridge out, which worked for rifles, didn't work for carbines.
Right, yeah, because the carbines didn't have that.
Mm-hmm. So that's about that. You want to go through some of these comments before we go on? Well, let's see. By the way, guys, we've run 65 most of the night, so that's pretty good. That's on both channels, by the way. There's a couple questions here I saw. If I missed it, I'm sorry, guys.
Oh, I see. Well, I'm going to get part of them on the Facebook because I'm watching it on 11 Bang Bang instead of my own.
Wes T said they happened on the winter solstice, December 21st. I always thought that was amazing. That was a ways back, so I'm not sure what he was talking about. December 21st.
The Fetterman Massacre.
Yeah. Okay. Wes T said, nice. I like that, Henry. Check that out. Maybe you should show that again.
Yeah. So the original Henry, and I guess I can talk about the repeating arms at this point in time too.
This airsoft.
Yeah, this airsoft. So with the Henry and the Spencer, both of them are going to be introduced in 1860. And so the Henry uses basically the old Volcanic, the Smith & Wesson Volcanic. The only thing that changed is Benjamin Tyler Henry designed it to shoot a metallic cartridge instead of those little rocket balls that weren't really good for much of anything, not even for killing rats. Unless you went up and hit the rat with the gun, butt of the gun. But that one's going to come out in 1860, and Henry was the engineer that beefed it up. Henry was the engineer that owned the patent. Henry was the engineer that produced them, but then they got sold under the New Haven Arms Company, and Winchester took all the money. So those were produced. Some of them wound up in some military units, but it was never formally adopted by the military. And as I said, at the same time, you have the Spencer that comes out, Christian Spencer, basically designs a gun loosely based off the Sharps rifle. In fact, it will interchange some parts with the Sharps. He's going to design it to where the buttstock becomes the magazine. This has a magazine tube in the back, and you throw the lever, and it kicks the round out of the barrel, and then brings another round up with that. I don't know if you call it a falling block or a rolling block action.
Lifter. I just call it.
No, I
lifter.
mean the whole block action.
Yeah. Oh, you're talking about Spencer. Sorry, I wasn't paying attention.
Yeah, Spencer. So that'll feed in. The benefit of the Spencer is that everything, the magazine tube, everything's encased. Unlike the Henry is exposed to the elements. The downside to the Spencer is that it only holds 7 rounds, and the Henry at that time could hold 15, 14 in the tube and 1 in the barrel. Thing of it is, you did not want to carry 1 in the barrel, a live one on a Henry, because there was no safety notch. It was either full cock or all the way down. There was no safety. And there's an account, and one of my followers on my side, Sabater, pointed this out to me. There's an account of a native that jumped off of his horse carrying a Henry rifle, and just the motion of him jumping off the horse and his feet impacting the ground was enough to set that cartridge he had in the barrel off and killed him. So, yeah,
That's
you did not want to carry a live round in a Henry chamber.
Well, they hold 15 in the tube, right?
Yeah, 15 in the tube, 1 in the chamber. That's
so
right.
I can see what Henry was thinking. Literally, we gone from 1 shot. You got 15 in the tube. Why in the world are you going to carry 1 in the chamber?
Right. Well, they did that for advertisement because they could fire 16 rounds.
Yeah.
That's why it gets called that damn Yankee gun they load on Sunday and shoot all week.
I said, did Duke ever get that old wooden boat sorted out that he started a year or so back?
Still sitting out here in the driveway.
That's been like 2 years ago.
Yeah, it's still sitting out here in the driveway. One of these days when I get some money saved up, I thought when I interviewed for this higher paying job down here that if I got it, I'd be able to get that thing fixed up and get it out of there. And I didn't get it, so it's going to sit there for a while.
Doug Dukes asks, what book are you looking at? I got to get away from my light here so you can see it, but yeah, this one is the description and rules for the management. It's only 8 pages, but it's a replica of what, and Duke and I talked about this. I don't believe every soldier got this. Your armorer would get this, and probably your sergeant, right?
Yeah, first sergeant probably have that, yeah.
And it does have a lot of information. Like I said, only 8 pages, though, but it's kind of important. The other book I've been using is the Wagon Box Fight. I already showed you that one.
Right.
Also, and I got some other books over there, especially on just the trapdoors and stuff, but Duke does all the history and the story study. I haven't done a lot of that. My study right now for about the last 2 weeks has been focused on the rifle itself. That's kind of where I do, whereas Duke studies the stories and stuff. Of course, he's been doing it a lot longer than I have, but this other one's pretty good. And I say Frontier Regulators by Robert M. Utley. And it talks about United States Army and the Indian, 1866 through 1891.
Right.
And I believe Duke suggested that one to me. Kodak Tackman's in. He said, howdy, y'all just got here. Red Dead Rimfire. I guess this one's for me. He said, homemade powder versus store-bought powder, pros and cons. Real quick rundown. Store-bought powder, Swiss, hotter, and cleaner. My homemade powder is about like GoX. It might even be a little dirtier than GoX, but not much. Maybe a little clean. It's right in there and about the same power. That's really the only thing. It's way cheaper. I make it for about $6 a pound. And when you pay the, if you buy some and pay the hazard fee, you're running right now about $40 a pound to be getting for Grafted Sons. So that's the real pro is the cost. The downside is
yeah, with the hazmat fees, you got to buy in bulk.
Yeah, and even then, though, it's still over $35 a pound, even if you didn't have that, or $30.
Well, I mean, because that hazmat fee will go for 25 pounds or 1 pound. So if
It
you order
will.
25 pounds and it's a $40, you can get that down to where you're actually only paying, oh God, whatever it is. I don't even know what it is a pound before the fee.
Swiss is 35 a pound right now.
Yeah. So by the time you'd be looking at 40 a pound. Yeah.
Even if you bought 10 pounds or so, but
yeah. Go X
and
Kids
that
is getting the shelves here pretty soon. Estes Rockets
yeah.
bought them and supposed to be getting a delivery here at some point. A friend of mine had ordered some. So, but
Hardy Hat hit on something here. He said something occurred to me. Did Spencer ever make a sporting rifle as opposed to military style with the barrel bands and such? He means without the barrel bands. I take it for the sporting rifle. Go ahead, Duke. I got my own thoughts on it. Go ahead.
not that I've seen. Now I've seen Spencer Gimmers.
That's where I was gonna go. Gimmer Hawkins.
Yeah, so they take and put a Hawken-like barrel on it with a cleaning rod, and it's actually a full functional Spencer.
With a really big, heavy, long barrel. That would be so awesome.
And they did that with a few of the Sharps too. But I've never seen it. Spencer was relying on military contracts, and the thing is, after the war, the military contracts just don't come in that much because right after the war, the Army's got this problem of they just downsized on a bunch of troops. They got a bunch of surplus guns, so they got to get rid of some, and they keep the Spencers that they have.
Yeah.
And of course, Spencer is going to go out of business, and then the Army's going to replace those eventually with 1873 trapdoor. The 7th Cav kept their Spencers up until 1874. So the Spencers are going to stick around for a long time. They'll see over 10, just a little over 10 years of use. But that's one thing is that the Spencer actually gets a government contract. Henry never did. So Spencer kind of gets the military side of things. Henry Winchester gets the civilian side of things. And of course they get foreign contracts, but Spencer just doesn't stick around for very long.
Yeah, trade gun, William. Yeah, that was a lot of what the Indians were using.
Yep. And when I say Northwest trade gun, the Lehman trade guns were prominent then too. In fact, I've seen quite a few pictures of guys carrying Lehman trade rifles.
Lehman, I'm not going to knock that Lehman anyway at all because from everything I've seen, it's made with a little cheaper wood. They actually didn't have any curly maple in them, so they literally painted the curly maple onto them. But all in all, the Lehman cost half of what the Hawken did, and I think probably did the exact same job that the Hawken did.
And people say that the Hawken was a mountain man rifle. The actual real mountain man rifle was the J. Henry. Not to be confused with the Henry lever action. This was a muzzle loader, but there was a lot of those out there. I mean, a lot. In fact, Ashley's crew, more than likely, you were going to see those guys carrying Henrys, J.J. Henrys, than you would find them carrying Hawkins, because Hawken wasn't really producing a whole lot. Hawken really didn't produce a whole lot during their entire time because, like I said, they weren't just gun makers; they were kind of do-everythingers.
Right at around 2,500 guns from 1831 to 1855.
Right.
So, 24 years, 2,500 guns.
They did make a lot of traps. They did make a lot of knives, hatchet heads and such, trade items. So they were present in the fur trade. There's no doubt about it. But they just, on the gun side, they weren't that as prevalent.
Most years that they were in business, they made less than 100 guns a year. Yeah.
And you really see most of those in the 1840s.
40s and 50s, they really took off. They actually hired 5 gunsmiths in the as far as I think it was 5 German gunsmiths in the 1849, 1850, somewhere in there.
Right.
Quote me on that.
Jim Bridger had one. Tom Tobin had one. Kit Carson had one. But all those guys had them after their mountain man careers were done.
Todd B said, Garrett, we need a longer video on your 1866 trapdoor. I actually have 2 1866 trapdoors. One of them's up above my head up there. I'm working on a complete series on them. If you've ever watched my Colt series, you know I've been getting the videos up to over an hour and 20 minutes at this point. And so the trouble is to get started. I took about 2 years before I started the Colt series and just read all I could read. This time, I really only started reading a couple of weeks ago, and I'm going to attempt to start the series maybe in 2 months or so. But I'm going to start back with the muzzleloading Springfield 1861 dash all the way through 64, and go through the 65 and let's see, 65, 66, 68, 70, 73. Technically, what's wrongly called the 78, it's really just a 73 with a messed up stamp. The 84 and the 89. And I have all of them right now in except the 70. And so it's going to be a big series. Probably going to take a few years to get through all of it. But yeah, I tend to have an hour-long plus video on each of these. So hopefully that works out.
So, Baines, you got 266s. Are you going to give me one?
No, because this one right here, guys, just so you know, I don't have most of these. I have them with the guns here. Well, most of them that you see behind me. Between my brother-in-law, my brothers, and my uncle and my dad, we got 400 plus antique firearms around. I got about, right here in this room, I got about 20 of them that are mine personally. The other guys have way more than me. This one is Caleb's, and I'm really proud of this one. We found it out of a museum in Florida because this is literally as mint as those guys would have got it back in 1867 because they were using used guns at that point, and this one has not seen. I was just so shocked when I opened up the door. And look at the inside of that.
Right.
Like it's had 1 or 2 rounds through its whole life, or it's been very well cleaned.
Now, is there any provenance that come with that as to where it was issued and where it was kept?
No. They got it in a trade with another museum, and I don't even know who that was at this point. By the way, all the people out there that say that gun belongs in a museum, just so you know, out of the 400 plus antique guns we have, probably half of them we have bought from museums. A lot of the time when you not a government, I say government, not like a historical site museum like Fort Laramie or anything like that, but a lot of times these little local museums will get guns donated to them, and these people aren't gun people. What do? They turn around and sell it for the museum for money, and it goes right back out onto the market. So
yeah, there's another museum that I know of that just went out, and they've been selling a lot of historic saddles and stuff. Mm-hmm. And I thought about trying to buy one of them. Found a Hope style saddle that the guy was trying to sell it for a lot less than what he could have got out of it. Something that I could have swung, but for whatever reason, he didn't respond to my request. But yeah, it happens. These little museums get shut down and they just can't make it anymore.
And some of them will deface or destroy the gun to make it not fireable. Some museums will do that to have it on display. They will take an antique piece like this that has never been fired and is in perfect working condition or been fired. Like I said, of course, this one's been fired, but it's really nice that some places they make them weld the barrel shut or plug them or remove the firing pins. And on cap and ball revolvers, you can't remove the firing pins. So that's where you see a lot of welded barrels. And some museums aren't nice to get. Some of them are. Cody is great. Cody Firearms Museum, places like that. But if you're donating a gun to a museum for it to be kept for posterity, be very careful about what museum you're donating it to. That's all I can say.
Yep.
Okay, let's go through a few more of these here. Serpent Hanzo, sorry if I said that wrong. He said, I think he's talking to you, Duke. Ever think of hosting a history course? That's what he's doing right here.
I thought about doing that, but to really get the credentials, I'd have to go back to college, and I'm just at that point in my life where it's like, I don't know if I would go back to college. Maybe, but it's not something that's high on my priority list, but I have considered it. I've been considering a master's, going for a master's in history, and then possibly a PhD after that.
So just so you guys know, his job is to give lectures and talks at historic sites. So he's already doing that. That's why he's so well studied on it. As a matter of fact, I know he doesn't want me to say this because he might have got a few things wrong at one point in the video, but if you go back on our channel and look for Duke Frazier, you'll actually find him on our channel, not his, by the way. This has nothing to do with Duke Frazier Productions, only on 11 Bang Bang. If you go back there and look, you'll find an entire, it's called Duke Frazier at Fort Laramie, I believe. He gives an entire history of the fort on camera in character, and it's really well done.
And I'm glad Garrett posted that because I went back and watched it. It's like, oh crap, I said a few things wrong.
It never it's almost impossible when you're going for an hour-long speech or even video.
Yeah.
And I find it all the time. Even on my own videos, I have to go back and I'm like, oh, no, I said the wrong thing. Because I'll find more modern information. Stuff's always coming out that changes. History changes faster than anything else.
Right. And that first stream that we did on the Indian Wars, it was like 4 hours long. There was a lot. I got screwed up on that one. Of course, one of the sources I was quoting I'd read, and this was a guy doing it from memory, and he got two guys confused. He got Frank Gerard and Fred Frank Gerard and Fred Gerard, who's also called Frank Gerard because his middle name was Francis. But anyway, I got them two confused. They were both at the Little Bighorn, but not the same time. One was at the battle and one was at the aftermath. So it happens, and there's a couple things I probably said in this one that I'll go back and it's like, oh crap, I screwed that up. But it happens, especially when I don't have the books here in front of me. I'm trying to do this off memory on this particular one. And yeah, after you go for an hour and stuff, sometimes things get screwed up. And me and dates are a big one. Tell you the month, I can tell you the year. Don't ask me the day.
Stephen M. Mann said, Garrett, somewhat true, but we are at a point of transition where natives start acquiring superior firearm power over an army stuck in the single shot world. You're approaching it, but in 1865, 1866, and 67, you're not there yet.
The only repeaters that they're going to have their hands on maybe is something like this that they've taken.
Yeah, there's only a handful of Henrys at that point that are out of the military's hands, and there's not many.
And actually, there's a lot of Henrys in the civilian hands, but between 1868 and 1876, they do start acquiring repeaters in great numbers, and a lot of that's going to happen in 1874, 1875. Supposedly,
it's going to happen when they send them to the reservations.
Yep. Supposedly, some of the Geneses were trading guns to the natives because at this point, on the agencies, they didn't have a problem with them giving them the old muzzleloaders and stuff, single shot rifles. They was part of their annuities. But the military was government was kind of worried about giving them repeaters, and the Genese brothers, or I should say the Genese family, some of those, the younger ones, in 1876, they were not hired on as scouts because the government knew that they were trading guns to the Indians. And so that made them untrustworthy. Supposedly, the Rishaws were in on that, or the Richards, however you want to say it. They were known as the Rishaws back then. Supposedly, they had been trading a handful of them to the natives. There was one of the Bordeaux's, Jim Bordeaux's son, I think it was Louis Bordeaux. He had got supposedly caught trading them. So it was going on. It definitely was going on. Frank Gerard, who was captured by Sitting Bull between 1868 and 1870, says that Sitting Bull was getting guns from the Métis. So it was definitely happening, but it was all boiling up until 1876. And then, at that point, then the natives showed that repeaters, are better than single shots in combat, but the Army doesn't catch on to that. They still want to keep the single shots for a longer time. But also, after Little Bighorn and the Army realizes that marksmanship should be part of being a soldier, not just running the gun, but actually be able to hit what you're aiming at, that's going to change things around.
And just remember that the treaties in 68 are going to mean that, correct me if I'm wrong here, Duke, but this is my impression of it. a lot of the Indians that are going to be fighting in the late 1870s will go to treaties or to reservations just to see what it's like, basically, in the early 1860s. As a matter of fact, when Custer takes off, it's because a lot of them are leaving the reservation.
Yep.
And when you get to the reservation, although you may not be able to, as a native, go up and purchase a Henry repeater or at this point a Winchester 1866 Yellow Boy, all you got to do is walk into your reservation trading store, speak to your agent, and tell him, point at that Winchester catalog and say, I want that Winchester repeating rifle. He'll order it through his name, and it's going to go directly to that native, and he will pay for it because they're making money their own ways at this point. Yep. A lot of these lever action rifles are literally going to come through the mail. A lot of people don't realize that, but
and that probably doesn't happen as much that particular way. But there is the, illegal traders. Like I said, the Rishaws and Genesis, them, they're trading guns, and the Rishaws, their dad traded liquor. Jean-Baptiste Rishaw, he traded liquor and guns in the 1840s and 50s. And, his boys kind of picked up on some of that too. But they were able to get their hands on them. And they was able to get their hands on powder. That's why at the Reynolds fight in 1876 in March on St. Patrick's Day, when Reynolds attacked Northern Cheyenne village and set fire to the teepees started to explode because that particular group of Indians had went and got their allotment of powder and ball. So it was from muzzleloaders, but they also talk about fixed ammunition going off in the teepees as well. So they had them. They had access to them.
Yep. Okay. West T said Esteline Bennett wrote about her experience meeting Red Cloud while she was holding on to General Crook's hand. It is a good book to check out. We sell a lot of them out of the museums in Deadwood. Old Deadwood days. Yeah. Okay, cool. I've been to a couple of the museums in Deadwood. Those are pretty good.
I need to get up there to those.
I was in the days of 76 not too long ago. That was a really nice museum. Bjorn Broder said, hey, Duke, nice to see you're doing some streaming. Keep up the content.
Yeah, I know him.
Oh, I'm still stuck on. I still got that one comment. I got to go clear back up here and hide it. All right. I didn't even notice that. Sorry, guys. So, strolling down here, got some interesting comments here. Todd B said, more bison were killed with the M1866 and M1868 and 5070 than the M1873. You're right, because Buffalo Bill killed 2,000 of them in 1866 or 1867 and 1868 with a rifle he was not supposed to have, but he had it. And actually, there's a story of a contest where he went up against another guy who was using a Henry, and they were going to see who could kill the most buffalo in a certain amount of days. And with that 50-70 Buffalo Bill just smoked that Henry with that big cartridge. Because let's face it, the Henry cartridge isn't exactly a barn burner.
No, if I was going to hunt buffalo, I tell you what, if I was going to be a buffalo hunter back in the day and I had a loadout, I'd have my long range rifle, which, could be a rolling block or a Sharps. And probably in 44-77, because that was a popular round and it was a screaming round and didn't take as much powder and had a little bit less recoil than what that big 45, 110, the 50-70s, and 50-90s had. But that's not going to be my main fighting weapon. I'm going to have a Henry or a Winchester.
But you also have to remember the doctrine's not set around natives at the time. The doctrine for the whole army would work pretty good with a muzzleloader if you're fighting a foreign invading army. Not so good if you're fighting a guerrilla war.
But yeah, if I was going out to hunt buffalo, I'm definitely going to have a Henry in a wagon box. Because you run into trouble. I'd rather have 16 rounds I can pump out fairly fast.
Absolutely.
Use the Sharps to keep them at bay while I can, but when things get close, that 16 rounds is kind of nice.
And the stuff's not as weak as most people think. I mean, some of the earliest stuff was, but some of that later stuff is basically you're taking a Schofield 45 round and putting it in a rifle when you get into the later 1860s, like we're talking here at the wagon box. That stuff, it's about a 210 grain or 220 grain bullet with about 26 to 28 grains of powder behind it at that point. It's not the slouch that people think of when they think of the first one that had like 19 grains of powder and a 200 grain bullet. So, one of my few said one of my few regrets in life is I missed the opportunity to go on a South Africa big game muzzleloader hunt. Yeah, that's kind of sad. Okay, so Todd B wants to know, can you talk about 44 Henry round versus the 56 round? Yeah, we can do that. And we just talked about the 44 Henry, and like I said, it's not as weak in the late 1860s as it was in the early days of the Civil War. They beefed it up quite a bit. And I know this because of my study of Colt. When they chambered that thing in the 72 open top, it was a 220 grain bullet with either 26 or 28, I can't remember off the top of my head, grains of powder behind it. So it's not the slouch everybody thinks it is. It's basically what in the 1880s, the military would take 45 Colt back down to, outside of being about 30 grains lighter in the bullet and about 2 or 3 grains lighter in powder charge. It's not bad, but let me look at, I got it off the top of my head, the 56 powder charge slipped my mind. So I'm going to look that up, but go ahead, Duke.
Yeah.
Talk
so
about the Henry round.
1860 Spencer's and 56, which is a 56 caliber bullet. And I always thought the first 56 was for powder charge. I didn't know that's the length of the case.
Mm-hmm.
So that one's a square load, if you will. But for whatever reason, 1865, they're going to take it down to the 56-50. So they're going to knock it down actually to a 52 caliber bullet. And so it's going to bottleneck a little bit. But Spencer was experimenting with some interesting bottlenecks, like the 38 or the 56-38. That was the bottleneck from hell.
Mm-hmm.
And I can see why they didn't produce it, because it's almost a 90-degree bottleneck. You'd blow a barrel eventually with that because it's too much pressure going down. But then they also had like the 40, the 56-40, the 56-46. They was experimenting, but the 56-50 is actually one of the more popular ones, and one that I've seen where the Army actually preferred it. So in terms of stopping power, the 56-50 is going to be better than the Henry, because it's a 50 caliber round, and if I remember right, that's something like a 300 grain bullet coming out of there, but it's not going to have the range. We proved on one of my videos when I was out there in Kansas with Garrett and them, they loaded up some rounds pretty close to as close as you can get to the original Henry load in terms of power. And I managed to whack human-sized steel target, what was it, 2 times out of 14? And that was with a pretty stout crosswind too. But
just to note, when you stepped it up to black powder plowboy load 45 Colts,
yeah,
you hit that thing probably 13 times out of 15.
No, that was with the smokeless.
With the smokeless, yeah, okay, yeah, the smokeless.
The plowboy loads, we couldn't hit the broadside of a barn if it was painted purple for whatever reason. Because Ethan sat there and he dumped 14 rounds at that target. He didn't hit anything.
What that tells me is the rifle twist in the modern reproductions is set for smokeless 45 Colt loads.
Yeah,
for that speed. Later.
But anyway, yeah. So the Henry could reach out there, but it's a pretty light round. It's not going to do the damage. So both of those guns really, that's going to be 100 yards or less ideal range. But there were buffalo hunters that did use Spencers, so it could be done. Because like I said, it's for the size it is, it's a fairly stout round, but it's kind of underdone, if you will. It could have been more potent. They could have beefed it up a little bit bigger, but at the same time, with the way that action works, it's kind of like, eh.
I was just refreshing my memory there. and it did use 45 grains of powder compressed with a 350 grain bullet. So you're looking at not a slouch. You're
It's going to be a hard hit round. It's just not going to be
harder
a hard.
It's way harder than 45 Colt. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, it's going to be like I said, hard hitting round, but it's just not going to have the range on it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I said, 100 yards. I have seen instances where they were taking out to 300 yards, but any of these old black powder guns at 300 yards, unless it's a Sharps, if you're in the smaller cartridges, they're not going to perform that well out at that distance.
I have a record of a guy known as the Pilgrim Bard, and actually it's in our Legend of Flower Pot Mountain video on our channel, but he talks about in 1872, he went up on the hill. The hill is literally right across the river. It's right there basically around where, where we were shooting the other day, those hills out that direction.
Right.
He went up on top of a hill, and he commented when he wrote that he was not armed well because he was only armed with his Spencer and 2 Colt Dragoons. But he shot a buffalo and killed it with that Spencer, so
right
at close range. So
yeah, no, and there are accounts of buffalo hunters that did use Spencers. It's just that wasn't ideal because you had to be a lot closer. Whereas the guys with the Sharps, they could sit back on a hill 300-400 yards away and just shoot and shoot and shoot, and they could drop 30 in a short amount of time.
And this was 1872, and if you read on, he'll tell you that he preferred his 62 caliber Plains rifle. So, and he didn't say who made it, other than it was a Plains pattern rifle of 62 caliber.
So
this was 1872. It could be any one of anything.
Yeah.
And that if he was going actually buffalo hunting and not just out on a scout, he wanted that big rifle with him. Wes T said, everybody check out Adams Museum in Deadwood, South Dakota. It's the oldest museum in South Dakota. Potato Creek Johnny's Gold Nugget is on exhibit since 2014. Cool. Soylent Green said 1860 Henrys didn't have a half cock. I did not know that. They don't have it.
They didn't have a safety notch. So I wouldn't really call it a half cock because it doesn't really come back to the half. It just comes back a little ways. But yeah, they did not have a safety notch, and that was one of the things they improved on the 66 Winchester is they put that on there because that thing was known to pop off a time or two. You did not want to carry it. Like I said, you did not want to carry it with a round in the chamber.
Oh, let's see. Just for anybody who's wondering, I got this old 73. It's right there. It's literally not at halfway. It's just right behind but that does not exist. See, that's full cock. Your safety would be right there. They're not on the. That is not on the Henry.
And one thing that Winchester has improved too, over the Henry and the 66 design, is that if you hit one of these or that trigger spring breaks or whatever happens, and that trigger stays depressed, and that comes down, it will slam fire.
This one won't because
it's got a safety lever in it. The old safety catch. That lever has to be fully compressed to fire.
And does yours have the safety latch on the back of the lever? I forgot to look.
Oh, yeah, it's got the...
Yeah, they all have those.
That's basically to keep it from cycling in action.
In reality, these guns are almost identical in everything except for the loading gate and the frame.
Because the thing with the Henry, especially, without having that safety notch too, is if you had a live one in the chamber and you just do this, it would fire.
Yeah. So on this, you have the safety not only of that, but it will not fire unless you're actually squeezing the lever up to the grip. Really safe gun in all reality.
And tell you what, I took this baby apart the other day. That's something I will never do again, is take that bolt apart because that's got a little pin in there holding the firing pin extension out. And I bent that thing over twice trying to get it back in place.
And I think we've learned why they didn't chamber those early guns in straight wall cartridges.
Yeah. Well, the 44 Henry was a straight wall.
Well, the Henry, yeah, that's what I'm saying. But when I'm talking about when we get to the 73, they don't chamber them straight wall cartridges anymore.
Yeah.
That's what I meant to say, the 73.
Yeah, and Spencer didn't use straight walls either, so maybe he had that idea already.
Oh yeah, you want to get ahead on one of H&A style underhammers? We have one. It's a really slick shooting gun. If you go back on our channel, you'll see it. I believe it's under what is this thing? Because we knew it was underhammer, but we didn't know what it was called at the time. And that one has been sleeved down from 54 to 45. It's a pretty nice little shooter. Actually, in the process of restoring it right now, making it a little more historically accurate to the old underhammers instead of the H&A style. Wes T said, I suppose if I was going to do a live stream podcast on guns, I'd go to Cody, Wyoming. Going to do it. Well, we've been up in that. I've never been to actual Cody, but I almost think that I know they got a huge collection of original stuff. But for what we cover between Duke, Snapper, and me and my brothers, we pretty well got representations of everything we need, including the Spencer, which is just a couple days late for the chat.
Yeah, the only thing we can get from the Cody's is the volcanics.
Yeah, we don't have any of that yet.
Because I think almost all the volcanics that are still around, majority of them are at Cody.
Yeah, or they're so expensive you can only see them at the Antique Firearms Show in Las Vegas, where Snapper goes and fills them all the time anyway. So I suppose I could use his footage if we wanted to. Diane Houston said, what year was your 1860 Colt made? This is an 1862, like first month of production, 1862. Right after Colt died. I really love this gun. I'm sorry, but yeah, that's what that one is.
That's the one that needs a little bit longer trigger, ain't it?
A shorter trigger.
A little shorter trigger. That's it.
But it doesn't bother me because I know that it's there, so I just make sure I pull the hammer with a little more authority. Some people who don't pull the hammer all the way back, that trigger's a little long on this one, and it will go to half cock. But if you pull with authority every time, you'll get it. But we probably will.
The sights lined up better on it.
That's the main thing, because the trigger on this particular one is long enough that the sights are just a little too low in the back.
Which makes me wonder if somebody intentionally did that.
It might. Well, the trigger seems to be original, so I don't know. It might not be. Somebody may have put a longer trigger in it at some point, but I don't know. Maybe one of these days I'll trim the top of it down just to see. But other than that, it doesn't cap jam. That's the main thing. No.
I'll tell you what, about 3 swipes of the file, and that one would be.
Yeah, it's just like most original Colts. I don't think I've ever had, out of all the originals I fired, and I've fired a lot of them I fired original 61 Navies, 51 Navies, 55 Roots, 60 Armies, 62 Pocket Navy now that Snapper loaned me that one. I've never had a single cap jam with probably, out of all those guns, I bet I've put almost 200 rounds through all of them combined. Never had a single cap jam, not one.
Yeah.
So I think it's the hammer spring pressure, but that's just me.
Well, there's that, and the modern caps are definitely not made to the original standards.
Yeah, but the modern caps still work on the original Colts for some reason. All of them really do. If you could get them to fit, that hammer will hold them on there. Now,
I've come across old 10 or Remington number 10s, and I'm talking this thing was probably made in the late 70s, early 80s. Mm-hmm. And those things were a lot heavier too, because when I fired them, they didn't explode out. They just kind of swelled and split down one side and fell off. So I think if Remington or one of those companies would start producing a double thickness cap, modern cap jams would be a thing of the past.
If Snapper's out there, I should probably talk to him. I haven't been to the bottom of the comment section in a while, but I don't know if
he said somebody had to go do a task and then he would be back.
Yeah, and he's fired a lot of the even older Colts than we have, like the first model Dragoon, and I don't know that he's ever had a cap jam with that gun. So I don't know.
Just wait for him to buy a Walker and start shooting.
I'm gonna be the first one in his country if he gets a Walker. I'm gonna be right there.
Yeah, he's gonna have to move and change his name. And
yep. Firearms Addict said that's going to be an interesting series talking about the Trapdoor series. Yeah, I have to admit that in the Colt stuff, I'm going on, and the further on I get, the less interest I personally have in the series. I mean, I got interest all the way up to the 73. Don't get me wrong, but after the after the 1860 Army, it really starts to dwindle for me, and I've actually start to slow down on producing the videos, and so I just need to go back sometimes and do something else for a little while and get a fresh take on it when I come back. But I'm really excited at this point right here because I'm about to do some derringers that there's not a lot of information on. That really gets me excited to be one of the first ones to put some of that information on the on video on the internet. And then after that, I get to go into the conversions, which I'm pretty excited about. So I'm pretty stoked for the next few, but at the same time, I'm just chomping at the bit to get this 5070 series off the ground. The trapdoor series. The only problem is finding 5070 brass right now is a nightmare. A year and a half ago, that stuff was everywhere for $1.25 a piece. And I believe right now you can't get it for $6 a piece on Gunbroker. So that stuff's hard to find. That's what's really holding me back.
You
there.
might get lucky and watch, and Starline might start production here pretty soon. I think they had it listed as yellow, which means that it's getting ready for production.
That would be good because as far as I can tell from everybody I've talked to, they've been out of production since 2020.
Yeah.
And so they've been back ordered for over 2 years or almost 3 years now. So anyway, moving on down here. Let's get on through a few more of these.
Yeah. There's a nice Chiappa, Taylor's Chiappa Sharps carbine conversion, 1863 conversion that I'm just tempted to put on layaway, but it's like it's a little too much money. So if anybody wants to buy me a fancy birthday present, you know. But yeah, I wouldn't mind having a 5070 Sharps.
Yeah, Stephen M. Mann said he loves a Hope saddle, but he says West T said yes, buy guns and help museums. Yes, okay. Okay, sorry if I picked on museums a little bit there, West T. Stephen M. said, but I'm looking for a good old A fork high. Can't saddle or okay, good old A fork high can't. He's saying can't hold, but he means he's spelled he just can't saddle, and I don't even own a horse anymore. So I assume he's looking for what we consider a bear trap. Is that what it is? A bear trap Hope?
No, it wouldn't be quite a bear trap because an A fork has still got that Hope profile on the pommel. It's just that most A forks by that point, you know, are fully covered in leather. So you're talking about a saddle that could weigh up to 125 pounds.
Yeah, Stephen M. was talking about the rifles the natives had. He said, yes, consider whiskey illegal, but yet it was still there. Absolutely.
That's funny. During the fur trade era, it's like, you know, Bent's is right on the border with Mexico. And in Mexico, it was illegal to trade guns to the Indians, but you could give them all the alcohol you wanted. And in America, you could trade guns, but alcohol was banned, even though it wasn't enforced to any great extent.
I realized something the other day watching The Unconquered, which is an old Gary Cooper movie. I'm sure a lot of you have seen. It's set during the French and Indian Wars, basically. But in the movie, they're talking about how England and France and the colonies and everybody is literally fighting tooth and nail to keep firearms out of the hands of the natives. And I thought, wait a minute. England, France, I don't know about some in America, had entire industries devoted to arming the natives.
Yep.
That's what I thought about. I thought all these old movies from the 40s and 50s I've seen, it's just not right because literally entire industries from those nations devoted to just arming the natives and getting furs back and becoming wealthy off the deal. At least at that point.
Right.
I don't even know how to pronounce that first name. Sorry.
Canopy
Cracker. There. All right. What sort of tricks did those that carried black powder sidearms use to keep those sidearms and cap and ball extra powder dry? And if it did get wet, could it be used once dried out? What's the procedure? Go for it, Dick. I'm going to go get a drink. You go ahead and handle that one.
Yeah. So, you know, you carry them in a flask, and then preferably you keep that flask in a saddlebag or in a pocket or somewhere to keep it dry. But in the event that your powder gets wet, black powder back in the day is not like smokeless powder today. Smokeless powder today, it gets wet, it's pretty well done, and it's not going to fire right. But black powder back in the day, you just lay it out, let it dry, crumble it back up, and then it's going to fire. It's not going to have the same effect because it's going to cause that the potassium nitrate to precipitate out a little bit. But it'll still fire. And there's accounts of that was one of the reasons why the mountain men preferred flintlocks over cap locks is, once the caps get wet, they're done. But with a flintlock, if your powder gets wet, you can dry it out and use it again. And if anybody doesn't believe me on that, just take a little bit of powder, get it wet, put it on a cloth patch, and let it dry, and then touch a flame to it, and it'll flare up faster than anything. You can even just clean in your black powder guns, those patches that you use in that, if there's a lot of residue left behind, you can turn that patch into a fire starter. But yeah, back in the day, you carry them in flasks, and powder horns are very popular because with a powder horn, the horn is going to be pretty well waterproof as they age and crack and such, and bugs chew through them. They do lose that, but that was one of the reasons why powder horns were used, is because they were more waterproof than other methods.
And you're talking about in the Rockies, when you look back at the Appalachian Mountains in the 1820s, you start to see the powder horn start to phase out for a flask, even for rifles, which are kind of cool flasks, But flask is not designed to hold up like a powder horn. Powder horn's designed to blow apart too, but if a spark gets in a flask, they're not built to stand up to mat long. That's why there's not so many old flasks left around. There's
tales of old trappers. They got too close to the fire with their powder horn on and blew themselves up. Most times, they just get splintered. Mm-hmm. I don't think I remember reading anything where a guy got killed from a powder horn going off. There was a guy that got killed from a powder keg going off. There was an old trapper and trader, Bill Gary, was his name William Garnier. Or no, William Gurrier. Anyway, he was called Bill Gary by a lot of the guys, but his given name was William Gurrier or something G. He was in the Fort Laramie area, and he was on a wagon and taking trade goods to the natives and was smoking his pipe, and one of the embers blew out of that pipe and managed to get into a keg of powder and blew him and the wagon sky high.
Yep. There's another story about that in Hanson's book, The Hawken and Its Place in History, where he talks about where Ashley's setting out right off the bat. One of the first things they do going down to the boat is they blow up a wagon of powder on the way down to the boat.
And blow up a bunch of the guns with it.
Yeah. So, just so you know, just a little bit more. I know more about the flask than my brothers do. They know more about the horns, but horns were not supposed to be glued ever in the plugs. You're supposed to tack them and seal them with what, wax, Duke? You know more about you.
Yeah, beeswax. You can seal them with beeswax.
The idea is if a spark gets in there, it'll blow those tacks out and just pop the plug out the back instead of. But like he said, and the same theory applies for the flasks. They're only soldered together. They're not made out of one solid piece. They're made to explode. And I see people these days, they will say, "Oh, I'm just worried it's going to break. I'm going to lose a pound of powder or something." So. Because they've seen them break, and they do break. They're pretty fragile. People will wrap them things with duct tapes, and I'll be like, I'm not standing anywhere near that bomb because it's designed to come apart. You don't wrap it up with duct tape. That's not a good idea.
But usually what happens when you see a horn blow on a couple of counts is it would go right up the middle. Just
and split.
And one of the reasons, too, why you see sometimes staples, the strap staple on powder horn is in line with the horn, is that creates a weak point. So if it does blow, it just opens up in two halves. But it would be fun for your powder horn to go off.
I gotta get a cheap powder horn someday and try that.
But and people forget, back in the day, black powder back in the day was more volatile, and this is probably why homemade black powder is even more volatile. Your Goex, your Swiss, that stuff has been
It's called FG for a reason.
yeah. It's been graphited to an extent. It's been graphited. Goex, I don't think they graphite that much, but the graphite essentially prevents a static electric spark. It
also
gives it a
fights
little more
moisture.
stability. Whereas with Garrett's homemade stuff, I guarantee if you put a stout enough static electric charge, into that,
You could
it's
probably
going to
set
go.
it off. And that's why you got to be extra careful with it. But the upper side of that, the positive of that is in matchlocks and flintlocks, my stuff ignites with more consistency than the graphited stuff because it basically ignites at a lot lower burning point. But just to get back to this question, one more thing. He said, if it gets wet, could it be used once dried out? Absolutely, because all powder, when it's made and ground, even the stuff I make, is wet. You wet it, you grind it so it can't spark and cause an explosion, and then you wet it again and you press it into pucks and let it dry for about 3 or 4 weeks. Then you grind those pucks up into the granulation you want. But all powder that you buy today, unless you're making it some weird way yourself, even the stuff that was made in the 1600s was wet and then left to dry. All of it has been wet at least twice, and some of like Swiss, I know they puck that stuff about 5 or 6 times, so most of it's been wet probably close to 10 times in its life, and it dries out and it works just fine.
Which is why you guys can get away with compressing that stuff and not blowing it up because it's wet.
Doug Duke said, Garrett, I hope you've been down to Davis Arms Museum. They have almost as many historical weapons as you and your family do. I don't know where that's at. I assume since you're talking about it's probably in Texas and you said down to. So I haven't spent a lot of time in Texas. I've been down to Amarillo. I haven't really been south of there. I'd like to someday. I'd like to go down to San Antonio and some of those other places to see some of that. I'm going to go ahead and try to get through this, guys, and we'll get out of here. Stephen M. Mann said, never thought to ask, our reproduction Henrys fix that? I think he's talking about the half-cock.
Yep.
Yeah, they got it.
Yeah, being these are made outside the U.S. and imported, they have to come with a safety. So,
only full cock on a dog lock. Yes. I mean, I want a dog lock so bad. I have my eye on one for a long time. I'd love to have one. I'm kind of like that history. Soylent Green said, I have only have reproduction 1866 and 73. Never messed with originals. Only original I have in a Winchester lever gun is in 1886. Well, that if you're going to have an original, have that one because there's not so many of those made. I'm kind of jealous. That's the beautiful big boy right there. 18. Didn't you have a original 1886 on your channel recently, Duke?
No, I had my friend. Well, it's a Winchester, but it's a Japanese-made Winchester.
Okay.
And it's an 86, and that thing is beautiful. I mean, it's just, it was beautiful. I wish we could have got a chance to shoot that and the 95, but my buddy only had so much ammunition, so he told me, he says I could shoot it, but I had to buy my own ammo.
Yep, Stephen M. Man, that is a very good point. If we went to Cody Firearms Museum, we're not going to touch the gun. Absolutely. As a matter of fact, we can't even film with a tripod in there without written paperwork permission. Believe me, I've looked all into it. Been down this road with Duke. Duke might be able to because he already worked for the museum service and all that. I don't know. He could probably work his way in there better than I could. But.
Well, and a friend of mine has a student that works up, or has a former student supposedly that works up there. I don't know if that's still the case or not, but let's just say I got a connection that I might be able to get some places.
And not only that, you have a step up on the paperwork. If you really wanted it, if we really wanted to do it, we could apply for it. It'd probably take 2 years to get it through, but you could apply for it as a research project and maybe not touch them, but go in and, you could.
Yeah, because I reached out to them about that at one point, and they said if I wanted to do stuff with a tripod, I'd have to set it up way in advance.
As a matter, I tried setting up at Fort Laramie once. just to do something like that. And it probably would have worked out if I'd have worked at it a little harder, but I kind of gave up after just a few days.
Oh, and I was going to let you know, and I'll just mention it to everybody on here now. They changed the rules once again on filming for national parks. So you're probably not going to see too much YouTube videos coming out of Fort Laramie if Garrett and them gets back up here, because now you got to get a permit. So
I'm glad we got what we got already.
Yep.
Everything Black Powder said, Snapper will have a line of people at his house waiting to shoot an original Walker. I'm not saying that it's going to happen ever. But if there's anybody that could probably do it, it'd be Snapper.
Put it this way, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it did. It's happened one day. You guys might stay tuned. Stay subscribed to Snapper's channel. You're probably going to see a lot of really cool stuff show up there. Yep, it's Yellow Rose of Texas. We started that song back in episode 2. In episode 3 of the series, I told Ethan, let's do a different one, and he said no. And here we are on episode 9, still using it, and it's just become a staple of the series. Jersey Red, Zan said, evening, boys. That's one of your guys, isn't it?
Yep, that's...
Oh, yeah. Guys, check out Firearms Addict. Today he unboxed the Sharps Berdan Sharp, sorry. That guy has more guns than we do. I'm telling you right now. He's got 5 cannons or 7 cannons or something. I can't remember.
Oh, geez. We got to go shoot the cannons.
Yeah, he's got everything. He's got, I'm not going to say any more about it. But, yeah.
If I ever win the lottery, I'm going to buy a nice little ranch out somewhere where it's got, river bottom through most of it. And it's going to have in front of my house, I'm going to have 4 mountain howitzers. I'm going to name them Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And they're going to spread the gospel to anybody that comes begging for money.
I was just going to say, I'm going to buy a ranch next to Firearms Addict because he's already got all.
I was sitting there thinking about it. I told my friend Carol, and I was like, yeah, I'll have those out there. And I said, then I'm going to sit back on my porch and have extra long lanyards on them so I can just sit back and just boom, 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 boom.
Give them what? Give them what, boys? Give them what? Okay, so yeah, he said the fit and finish on my Chiappa is really nice. Yeah, I saw that. Guys, go check that out. That is a really nice. I don't know if I've ever even actually seen another YouTuber, and they're probably out there, but I haven't looked real hard, actually have a Berdan Sharp. Now, his is a replica, of course, but it's just so cool to see that big, long banded rifle with that Sharps action on the back. Okay, so Serpent Hanzo. I guess I'm saying that right. Does that look right? Serpent Hanzo.
Oh, it's Serpent. Yeah, his name's Jacob.
Oh, yeah, Serpent. Yeah, okay. I heard you talk about him. He said he's leaving. See you later. He said, Duke, I have one of those 5070 Chiappa. It looks very rich, close to the originals, and looks good, too. Is that a rolling block, Doug?
No, Sharps.
Oh, yeah, you're talking about Sharps at that point. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
5070 is a very underrated round.
Right. It's just $2,000 right now. It's kind of spendy for something for living history, especially because I can't find the ammo for it.
Yeah.
But God, I'd love to get one.
I'll tell you this. There's a lot of big YouTube channels that even tout a little bit of history. One of them may have the initials of Mac. I'm not saying that for sure. But a lot of those big YouTube guys will get on there and talk about the 1873 and the 4570, the first battle rifle cartridge or service rifle cartridge of the United States. And I'm like, hold it just a minute.
Hold the phone there. You got about,
you got at least another, you've got like 8 years of production. Technically, the first one adopted across is the
technically the 5650 is the first battle rifle cartridge adopted.
Yep. But as far as across the entire infantry, 5070 is about a safe answer.
Because they did 5070, they adopted that in 66, and they fiddled around with that in 1870, and then they decided, well, what really come down to on that decision that played a part in it is they wanted a standardized 45 caliber round all across the board.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no way you're going to get a handgun in 50 caliber at that time, although I think Colt could have pulled that off if they really tried. But he might have had a Walker-sized revolver. But the revolver was going to be in 45, so they decided to do the rifle in 45. And the thing about it is, and we found this in Army Ordnance manuals, is that you're supposed to be able to fire a 45 Colt out of a 45-70 barrel.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the thing is the 45 Colt, the rim is a little bit more pronounced now than it was on the originals.
I've shot 45 Colt blanks through a 45-70 single shot. It works. They just don't. Yeah. They don't extract real well sometimes.
Yeah, so we tried that up at Fort Laramie because we found that in that Army ordnance thing, and I was like, I'd be worried about that pressure or not. But then I realized that's our rifle cartridge and a pistol. So it's like, all right, let's try a blank because we can only shoot blanks up there. Because we was trying to do that as a viable option to shoot the rifles because we couldn't get 45-70 blanks. So we put a 45. It's actually is a 5-in-1 blank, but it works in the 45s. Put that in there, and it fired, but it will not kick them out. You've got to. They'll fall out, but it won't kick them out.
Mueller is a notorious bear trap style. Yeah, Steven had one of those hanging around the ranch where it worked for a long time.
Mueller, Meeker, I think Minya made a bear trap style. I seen a Meeker that, holy crap, I would not ride.
I can't remember if it was a Mueller or a Meeker, but they had one up there at the ranch. It had been there since our ranch has been here since the 1860s. And that saddle had been in there since like the 1880s or 90s. Like, I don't remember exactly when they're made, but that's from when that era that saddle was from. I took it out and oiled it one time, and I thought about putting it on a horse. And then I looked at it, and I looked at me, and I looked at my fat thighs, and I looked at that thing again and thought, nope, I ain't going to do it. It ain't no way I'm getting in that thing on a horse. Stephen Sheets is in. He said, howdy. Hi, Stephen. Long time no see.
Yeah, it's been a while. Yeah, I was going to ask you guys that one saddle we used for that Gus filming thing, if I could take that and refurbish it for you, but
I'm sure they'd let you. That thing needs some work. That was Roger Mills's saddle. That old cowboy was from around a long time ago, and the famous story of that saddle was it had a pair of, back in the, I believe the 60s, he had a pair of, the 1960s, had a pair of wire plier holster on the side, and he always carried his fencing pliers there. And
yeah,
he
that's
had
pretty
that
common.
Had that horse. I mean, a lot of saddles do, but the famous story about that saddle is you notice that the hide was all tore off the horn, right?
Yeah.
Well, he had a horse run away on him there in the 1960s at one point, and he took them pliers out while that horse was at a dead run, reached up, clubbed that horse between the ears and the sharp end of those pliers and killed it dead. Yeah. And you talk about a pile up, and when the pile up was done, everything was tore off him, and the skin and the hide was tore off the saddle horn too. And I think that's probably the last time I tried to ride that saddle. Cannel wasn't tall enough. I always felt like I was sliding backwards. Going through just a few more of these. I always click on Soylent Green Man. He's got a lot of knowledge, so I always want to see what he says. And I know a lot of you other guys do too. But my 1886 made in 1888 45-70. It's fixed by the Cinnabar. Ooh, cool. I love that channel.
Oh, yeah. I just started watching that guy, and that guy's got, he knows some stuff.
He's got more originals than any of us will probably ever have.
The first video I watched was a blown up 94 Winchester or 86. I don't remember. It's blown up original Winchester that somebody decided to shoot somebody else's reload in there. And I think what happened is they used a duplex load of black powder and smokeless because they pulled one of the other bullets that was still left, and it had a mixture of black powder and smokeless in it, and blew that gun up.
He said, awesome show, guys. Thank you for a super answer. By the way, it's pronounced Mikunopi. Oh, Mikunopi. I guess that's how it's pronounced. Extremely small town south of Gainesville. Don't feel bad. No one gets it right. Ha, 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 ha. West Covina Dodge. He's ready to start an argument.
Yeah, well, he's got a bias. He's got a bunch of the Martini Henrys. But that Martini Henry, that is a stout hitting round. Because that takes a 577 Schneider and knocks it down to 45. And holy crap!
Yeah. Thank you for going over there. Yeah, that's a great channel. If you guys want to go sub to Firearms Addict, you get Muzzle Blast Mondays. original firearms, replica firearms, and cannons. So Doug Duke said Buffalo Arms has had 50-70 loaded ammo, Black Powder Smokeless. That's the key word, had. I been looking for a while for the last several months, and nobody showed up with any yet. Like I said, I can buy brass on Gunbroker, but you're just going to pay for it like crazy. I'm too busy buying
I keep an eye
guns
on Starline, because Starline, last I looked, they do have
they have the yellow back ordered light on it.
Yeah, so it's on the production lineup, but whether it's 6 days, 6 weeks, 6 months, or 6 years, it's anybody's guess.
Yep. Well, Steven, it's pretty good now that you're here. And we are down to the bottom.
All right.
All right, guys. We made it through in 2 hours and 9 minutes.
Although I think this last hour's mostly just kind of off topic, but
that's what we're here for.
Yeah. No, as long as we're sharing history, that's fine. We do the topic, and then we can talk more history.
And we still haven't dropped below 55 on both channels, the whole chat. So
right. So yeah, I think next maybe do one more on a split,
and then we'll go to your channel.
Then we'll start moving it over. So the next, what is it? It's 2 weeks from today. The next topic, I'm not sure what topic we're going to hit on. Might actually finally try to get into that Southern Plains Indian War. Because like I said earlier in the chat, the Sand Creek Massacre, that's kind of the point where the Northern Plains Indian War and the Southern Plains Indian War is really kind of split out. It's that connection between both is what I really should say. Is it? So we'd start from there and work our way through. But I got a lot of reading I got to get done. Some of that stuff I've forgotten, and some of it I haven't had a chance to read up on yet. But going to start going through that. I think we'll try to hit that on the next one. Unless, Garrett, you got something you want to hit on the next one?
This is your show, man. I'm just sitting over here talking too much.
Hey, that's fine. That's fine. That's kind of, if it wasn't for Garrett, we probably wouldn't have this going. It was his idea. So we could say that this is a co-hosted thing.
Yeah. I'm learning to play second fiddle. It's going to take a second. That's literally what I want to do, because I want to give Duke more time to spread some of that knowledge around that he's got.
Right. But I think the next 2 episodes will be set in stone, and after that, I move back up to Wyoming. And so April, I'm not going to guarantee what's going to happen there. And once I get started on my job back up at Fort Laramie, there's a very good chance that I'm going to wind up with closing shifts this year. And so depending on what my schedule is, that may screw up the whole thing. We'll see. But
there'll probably always be another one coming. We'll announce when it gets there.
So yeah, in 2 weeks we'll be back here on the split between me and Garrett, and then after that it'll all be on here. But Garrett's still going to be here as co-host. Then Garrett, am I on with you next week?
No, I'm not even actually on next week, but there is going to be an 11 Bang Bang Reload show, if you don't mind plugging. And that is going to be my brother Ethan Woods and Ethan Yazel. And wait, I gotta stop. Before I make up any lies here, I better look at the calendar. Because we had to, let's see. Yes, on the 4th. So that'll be a big chat. And I'm actually going to set that one out because I've been doing this every week for a long time. But Ethan and Ethan Yazel from I Love Muscle Loading are going to be together on the 11 Bang Bang Reload show on the 11 Bang Bang channel. So,
okay. And then I guess it's the next one. After the next one, I'm back on with you.
Yeah. Every other week is what we got worked out right now. But yeah, we got.
Well, I know I've got another one with you on 11 Bang Bang here.
Yeah. And I think we might. I haven't got the guess nailed down yet, but the next one, yeah, we'll work it out. It's basically going to be going every other week.
Right.
Reload show, Tales of the Trails.
Hopefully.
Is it Tales for the Trails?
Tales of the Trails.
Tales of the Trails. That's what we got.
Yeah. It's a funny story. So I don't know if y'all saw the poll on that, but I put a poll out trying to figure out the name for this. And it was Tales of the Trails, bearded fat guys, Mountains to Plains or something like that. And I don't remember what the other fourth one was in there. But anyway, Tales and the Trails and bearded fat guys were like neck and neck. It's like, bearded fat guys take the lead, then Tales of the Trails take the lead. And finally, I just decided on the day that I shut it down, I was like, okay, whatever one is in the lead at noon on this day, I'm shutting it off, and Tales of the Trails was it. So this very almost become the bearded fat guys history chat.
I strongly voted for On the Hills of Manifest Destiny, and nobody.
That
else
was the other one.
Me.
Yeah, that one, and that one was one I was kind of hoping for, but that one didn't get very many votes at all. But Mountains to Plains history chat didn't get any. I think.
I think so too. Everything Black Potter. I think so too. If I didn't get On the Hills of Manifest Destiny, I wanted the bearded fat guy history. That's what I wanted, but that's not how it worked out. So.
Well, either way, you still got two bearded fat guys.
Yeah, we're still here. Oh man! So, are you about ready to get on out of here then?
Yeah, I think. Well, yeah. If we're caught up on the comments, thank you all for joining in on this one. Sorry that we didn't go with the original one, but it seems like everybody was happy with the way it turned out anyway. But on the next one, I'm gonna try to get read up on that Southern Plains Indian Wars, and depending on how far I get read up, it may be a multi. I'm guessing it's going to be a multi-project. But at some point, we're going to have to do the Northern Plains Indian Wars again, because that one, I think, got deleted off 11 Bang
All
Bang.
that got deleted, yep. The sad thing is now, man, we got to get a Sharps in the next 2 weeks if we're going to the Southern Indian Wars.
Sharps would be nice. And
you already had one, but you don't anymore.
Yeah, no, my Sharps, it was spent a lot of time in the safe, and I could not find ammunition for it. And I thought I was all out of ammunition, and I found out I got 2 boxes I didn't know I had. Actually, I thought I had 1 box, and I sent that with the gun, and then I found 2 more boxes here, but I'm going to hang on to that. Because at some point, somebody between me and 11 Bang Bang is going to get a 45-70.
There'll be one here on Monday.
There you go. All right. And these, I'm pretty sure, are trapdoor safe. So it was just sitting there in the safe, and Bangs, I got one with a pistol grip and a shotgun butt plate. Wasn't really set up to be used for living history, even though you could custom order Sharps with that stuff back in the day. Most of the ones you see don't. I've never seen a picture of a pistol gripped Sharps out hunting buffalo. So somebody offered me on a trade for my 1860 Henry, and I looked at the price of what that Sharps was going for currently and what the Henry was going for currently, and it was a fair trade. So, and I thought, much as I hated to part with that Sharps because that was my college graduation present to myself, I thought, if I trade it for something else that I'm going to get a lot of use out of, that I could use for living history, and I'd probably shoot this a lot more, I decided to go with this one. So, yeah, it was a long thought out trade, but it went. The Sharps went to a good home. It's being well looked after. So, and another person that appreciates history and that stuff. So I'm glad that it got to the home that it did.
It's a good deal.
But yeah, at least now I can pack around this Henry, which weighs about the same.
And it's a great rifle for coon hunting in the timber.
I couldn't figure out why the guys all carried pistols when we went out coon hunting, and it didn't take me very long to figure out why. Although it's pretty nice to be able to stick that rifle up just like this and go through the brush and not get hit in the face.
That's true. That's true. Well, I'm ready to end it if you are.
I'm ready to shut her off here. I think we're all caught up on the chat. So, George Gooding. So that
I'm
comment,
not even going to click on that one.
no, you don't have to. But that comment, that was one that old Jeremy Gunslinger, we made him title one of those. I forgot about that. Oh, them were the good old days.
He's reaching way back there.
Yeah.
Before me, before my time.
So, anyways, thank you all for joining in on this. Like I said, stay tuned. Next one, we'll try to do the Southern Plains Indian Wars. I know Garrett had mentioned something about doing Oregon Trail stuff here at some point. We got to do the Northern Plains Indian Wars at some point. We got to get into the Nez Perce War. There's a lot we can talk about. And another thing I was going to mention is I'm going to try to start doing maybe a podcast when I get a chance to. I've been playing around with doing that here on this computer. And the big thing is I just got to sit down and kind of get creative writing and write up a script so that I actually don't stumble and fumble around a lot. But actually doing podcasts takes about as much, if not more, than doing a video. So, but keep an eye out all for that stuff. Like I said, thanks for joining in. Thanks, Garrett, for helping me manage the channel here and joining in on this. And be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Keep your powder dry. Y'all take care.